I want to welcome you, all of you, to Prague Micro Festival's yearly Critical Encounters panel discussion. I would like to begin just quickly by giving a brief caveat that despite the title of this discussion and this section of the festival, this panel aims to go beyond a simple criticism, as it were, of the world as it is. We can begin from the assumption that those of us who are gathered here are not advocates of imperial war, of invasion, or of genocide. And I'll quote briefly from philosopher Alain Badiou and say that, quote, "The fact is, we don't need criticism today. Everyone is able to criticize today's world, apart from the subsidized propagandists whose job it is to celebrate it. Anybody on the street knows that the present is awful and can tell you why." And I'm guessing that all of us could probably do the same. Thus, we're not here to tell you how awful the world is. It's painfully clear at this point. Rather, this panel is about resisting dissolution. That is not simply condemning the very real dissolution of lives and collectivities and principles, but resisting the corresponding dissolution of thought that comes entail. I'm thinking here of such crises and horrors in isolation or confusion, or in the deafening murmur of the present, to invoke a title from Jan Bielicek's recent book. And once more, to quote Alain Badiou, and segue us into a quick introduction, the dissolution of any real possibility for thought is effectively a process of negation of the world as a habitat for subjects. That's really what nihilism is. This instance of destruction that makes the present uninhabitable, where dwelling means the possibility of truly confronting something. You could say that there is a withdrawal of unconcealment, a dissolution of the present. This dissolution is also the destruction of the incorporation of the past, not of its memory or history, but of its present vitality. So thus, to this discussion, we're honored to welcome first Dr. Václav Němec, an expert in the fields of medieval, political, and existential philosophy, as well as a Latinist and philosophical anthropologist who is based at the Czech Academy of Sciences and the Institute of Philosophy. We are joined by Liana Micko, a well-known figure of Lviv's artistic and cultural front, who is active across many sectors, whether in her role as the director of the Lviv Municipal Art Center, as a radio host, musician, event organizer, or as the founder of Lienov Teshi and other initiatives. Also joining us from abroad is Portugal-based philosopher and media theoretician Filip Teuchmann, a PhD candidate who is currently teaching at Nova University of Lisbon, as well as editing the Journal of Communication and Languages. And last but not least, we are joined by Jan Bielicek, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Deník Alarm, who is prolific in written and recorded journalism, as well as in his own critical theoretical writing. So please give a warm welcome to all of our panelists. So obviously, these brief introductions are insufficient. They're leaving a lot out. So the first round of questions here are simply meant to give you all a chance to not only answer them directly, but fill in the gaps if you wish to talk more about your own background and what you're doing. So to start, I would like to address you, Dr. Němec. Firstly, congratulations on your recent monograph publication, which we can, I don't know if it's translated, but we can translate it as Heretical Essays on the Future of Freedom and Democracy. Is it yes? Yeah, okay. So please, if you will, just introduce how your deep sense of history, which draws from both ancient and medieval historiography and philology, informs your perspective on the civilizational crises we face in the present.
Good evening. Thank you for your kind introduction and for the commemoration of my book. It is a difficult question. It's not for a short answer, it's for a lecture. But I try to say it shortly. and in the first essay of my book, I am concerned with the concept of crisis, and I argue that a crisis, a societal crisis, is among other things a consequence of a society coming into conflict with its own values and fundamental principles. And it means to understand the state of current state of the Western society and civilization and democracy, this crisis. It means to understand our principles, our fundamental principles, ideas, and I think this is the task of the history of ideas. I think the history in general, and especially history of ideas, is very important, and it is like a mirror which helps us understand better, because we can assess if we are really upon our values and principles, or if we are abandoning them. And this is I think this is the first point which the history of ideas is very important to understand our contemporary situation. But I am not a historian, I'm a philosopher. And I think I think the most important tool for understanding our situation and for orienting within it is exactly philosophy, because philosophy is critical and principle thinking, which tries to understand things in very extensive context, and which tries to penetrate under the surface of phenomena to their principles, and in this respect, I think if we want to understand the situation and crisis of our Western civilization, so we need philosophy as this tool for understanding and orienting within our situation, and this is the aim of my book. And above all, the philosophy is self-critical thinking, and this is, as I think, it's the most important because philosophy helps us understand our own prejudices and ideological framework within them we are living, and philosophy help us free from these frameworks and liberate from these ideological frameworks, and I think this intellectual liberty is very important to explore the new ways of thinking and to search for answers to challenges of the current of the contemporary situation of our time. So I think it's my job. So the philosophy, it's my job, and I think that philosophy can help a lot in this very urgent but difficult task.
Great, thank you for your generous response. I would like to go a little bit further beyond the abstract, because you brought up a lot of topics, and I understand it was a big open question. But of course, you're talking about the contemporary situation in the light of crisis. I suppose that the earmarks or ruptures of such a crisis could be the two main topics at hand today, which is Ukraine and Palestine. And I understand that your own personal work, and especially in this recent publication, is largely a critique of the state of so-called Western democracy and the values and principles that are attached to it. And in light of that, my question to you would be, this year, you co-sponsored the petition, and again I'm translating, 100 plus 100 children from Gaza, which has been, and perhaps is being, negotiated by various government bodies, especially of the Ministry of Interior, as well as between the Red Cross and President Pavel. So what has been the response to this petition? And as a second part of this question, if you would allow me, given that the Fiala-led government, foreign ministry, and UN actions of Czech Republic have unequivocally supported Israel, does this kind of work represent a lingering optimism on your part, a preserved belief in the potential, let's say, responsiveness or equity of quote-unquote Western democracy?
Thank you. It's a difficult question because it was, in the end, it was a big deception for me, the result of this initiative. But the initiative began or started in April. In April we called on the government to accept 200 Palestinian children from Gaza to the treatment in our facilities, and it's in summer it looked optimistic relatively, because, as you said, some organizations such as Red Cross and Caritas negotiated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and with this MEDEVAC, which is an initiative at Ministry of Interior, and there is no progress in this thing, unfortunately. And Senator Pavel Fischer asked a few weeks ago how the things go on, and the answer was very sad. So that they told him that there is before election and they want to do anything in this issue. So I think for me it's not they are not reason for optimism, but it's deception for me. But if I should say what was the reason why I supported this initiative, so it was not expression of a political stance. So it was only my human reaction to this suffering of Palestinian people, which is terrible, horrible. So I think this is the only thing, the very small thing we could do, so to help for the more helpless, most helpless beings, such as the small children.
And I believe, Liana, you wanted to...
Let's keep in mind that more than 19,000 children now are in captivity in Russia. Ukrainian children are in captivity in Russia, from the eastern part of Ukraine. Please keep it in mind and also remember about this stuff.
All right, so Liana, since you took the microphone, I think it's a perfect time to get a little bit into introducing yourself a little further, because I think we all want to hear from you. It's been over 3.5 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as you no doubt don't need to be told. How do you perceive your work in Lviv during the present phase? And more specifically, how is your relationship to art and the cultural front, if we can call it the cultural front, because it's not merely a sector or a sphere, informed by the notion of recovery?
Yeah, we have now only one front. It's mostly about front where our warriors are ready to fight against Russia, to stop this evil against Europe, against Europe society, against Ukraine. So we cannot tell that art is a front. It's like nothing. Not okay, probably in some basic stuff. And my position in my city is mostly do what I did all these years. I'm a culture manager and do all stuff around this. And mostly things we do right now, I have like some theories at Lviv, and my work is in the center of tornado. So in Lviv, when you got there like a tourist, or like you got there like for some work stuff, you can feel yourself very comfortable. You can go to concert, to festival. Just before our discussion, I was talking about culture in Kharkiv, culture in Kyiv. Culture life in Ukraine now is in a super level, and everything is very alive. All this underground situations start to be upper ground because it's true. All this DIY system is always got to be true, and this is like true nervous of society. So that's why now we are like in one great unity in Ukraine, creating art events around, and only because we are all together we can feel ourselves more or less comfortable during the war, because we can support ourselves not only in the culture level, but great number of my friends, of my colleagues now in the front line, they work like volunteers sometimes and so on. So we still continue support each other probably. It's not only about art stuff, it's also about war stuff, about making ourselves alive in culture, in everyday life and so on. So if to tell about role of art of this is great connection. If you feel yourself connected in this civilian life, normal life by art, during the war, art is super necessary and we feel it very, very much. For example, we got a situation a week ago, we took part in a great combination of Zhanna Kadyrova. She is an Ukrainian artist and she will create Pavilion of Ukraine in Venice Biennale this year. So Zhanna Kadyrova made evacuation of her sculpture from Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is now under bombing, but she made evacuation of sculpture of deer from Pokrovsk, and this deer traveled on the truck through all the Ukraine. And last week we made like a visit of this deer, of this sculpture, Lviv, and this deer will go to Venice Biennale on May next year. So my mission in Lviv was to make a great touring of the sculpture in the city, and idea of this event, of artistic event for civilian society and for militaries who are in Lviv right now, is to show that we must support art, we must save it from bombing, from Russia, and we need to show it to Western world and to show it with some messages. So yes, if to tell the truth, art got great combination of different stories around, and I can tell about many of them. Also how we support, for example, injured warriors by art is also very necessary right now, because this is the thing what we can do now.
Yeah, I want to pick up exactly on that last point. Throughout your work at the Lviv Municipal Center of Art, you have been facilitating rehabilitation, we can say, and psychological healing with art, and even some, from what I understand, vocational training for soldiers returning from the front lines. And throughout all of this, you have written and commented about experiencing a strong archival urge or impulse, we could say, to document, to archive, and the need exactly to document resilience and collective memory, which has been emphasized by the conditions of ongoing war. So what kind of archive, could we say, is being built in the present? And how does the current digitalization or platformization of such collective memory shape this archive that's being built? And what kind of a role do you see as you playing in constructing this archive and preserving this historical memory? I know I'm putting you on the spot with this, but I wanted to follow up on that.
Okay, art is one of languages we can fix reality right now, and so many friends of mine who are musicians, who are artists and so on, they go back from the front line for vacations, or it's a pity they can be injured, or okay. So when they go back to Lviv, we give them platform and some ideas how they can present themselves, how they can present their history they got at all. And mostly people want to do nothing when they go from the front line. We can understand it because their energy is low. But when they want to do something, we create different kind of collaborations. It can be residency, it can be time in workshops, for example. It can be place to create exposition, some readings and so on. And one of great initiatives in Lviv we got right now is creating comics with warriors. Yuri Vovkohon, he was warrior from 2014 and he is one of the coolest art managers I know in the city. He made this idea to collaborate 20 different veterans with different kind of knowledges about war, different stories, and they made novels. After this novel started to be a comics, it was collaboration with UA comics shop, bookshop. This is one of the famous book printers, printers of comics in Ukraine. And after this, this comics started to be inclusive because they started to be audio stories also. So this is one of ideas how we can combine ideas and memory of soldiers to art, to books, to paintings, illustrations and so on. And this is very multiple thing. It really depends on how people feel themselves comfortable to speak about their memory. And sometimes it can be poems, sometimes it can be music. Like I can send you maybe some different albums we got right now in Ukraine, and usually when musicians in these albums are from a home front, from a rare situation in Ukraine, they used to bring poems of veterans, of soldiers, they used to bring their voices there inside. It's also part of this combination, how we can archive stories of soldiers.
Thank you. We're going to keep this conversation going among the panelists, but for now I still want to continue to allow each of our remaining panelists an individual question to introduce themselves. So Filip Teuchman, I will turn to you. In your research, you take an interest in the role of the image and its technological mediation in today's world of what has been termed, let's say, the operational image, images that are not oriented to an aesthetic or maybe even a representational form, but that function within systems of machine vision. At the same time, you bring a certain critical awareness not only to the productive processes upstream from such images, but also to the political and ethical realities downstream. So how can we think the present conjuncture, this reality of, quote, live-streamed genocide, which is itself bolstered by an industry, of military and surveillance images, how can we think this in terms of images?
Thank you for the question. Well, to comment on some things that have been said here, my line of work has as its point of departure that to engage in critical thinking today, or at least in philosophical thinking, there needs also to be a kind of materiality or materialistic thinking. That means that, for example, if you are engaging with machine visuality, like the drones that are used by Ukraine and by Russia, or the jamming and so on, you have to do field work, you have to talk to the engineers, you have to talk to the people in the military. So that has been my line of work in the last few years. So to answer your question about live stream genocide, which is a big concept, I'm not sure if I'm able to engage it in a very direct manner, but I will just add a few notes about this. First, the televisualization of genocide is nothing new, so it goes hand in hand with the 24/7 2007 news cycle. So that's a critique that has been largely made since the Iraq War, since Afghanistan. So it's nothing new. It began with the models of American news making in that sense. But, well,
and American genocide.
Sorry?
And American genocide in Vietnam and in places like
okay.
this.
In that regard, if it is a genocide or not, I will not give a direct expression. But its archaeology goes way back. So it is related to photography. It is also related to the archive. So because there is this kind of unconscious of the archive, which can also be, it can be a productive archive, right? But for example, in Russia you have archives too, or you have Israeli archives and so on, and there are also the production of these, I would say, these violent subjects. You see, so from the point of view of the images and of textuality, the archive, it depends on its use, but it is possible to create an archive, for example, of images and so on, that leads to a kind of production of a certain subjectivity. You see, and you see that with Russian propaganda, etc., etc. So this is the first point: first news making, and then production of subjects, in the sense that our media produce us more than we produce them, or at least it's a recursive relation, but they produce us. That means that different medialities, different technologies, different technological cultures, different technological singularities produce different subjects. And you have that with the United States, you have that with Russia, you have that with China, and you have, on the other hand, that with Palestine, with Ukraine, and with other countries, I would say minority countries, in the geopolitical sense. So, because they are not hegemonic in a geopolitical sense. That is the first point. Okay. The second point, regarding your question about machine visuality, is that war is changing fundamentally. From what I've been reading, from what I've been seeing, war has, and this is not, these aren't news, that it has changed, but it also means there are new war subjects. So there are different ways of occupying a territory, of attacking the enemy and so on. And there the transmission of live killings, for example, is a very, I would say, powerful tool, or at least occupies a very specific aspect of this kind of new war. So, and just to finish my reflection, I would further add that most of the transformations in contemporary war are related to vision. Okay? So it's not like Heidegger, to quote a famous philosopher, said that sound is easily processed and digitized, or it's easy to get sound into a cybernetic system, but vision is something completely different. No, it's the other way around, actually. So vision has been at the center of various wars. It has been at the center of the Israeli campaign to target and to process facial recognition through Google, through Palantir and so on. And it has been at the center of Russia's effort to gain a technological advantage. And it has been also as a countermeasure on the side of Ukrainians, for example, with the Project Maven, that is an American project whose objective is that target recognition and decision-making in the military starts to be automated. So,
thank you very much. Yeah, so we're talking now a little bit more deeply, let's say, about repression and repressive systems, and it's only too easy to look at situations, as you brought up, such as in Ukraine and in Palestine, We can also look pretty close to home for instances of repression, albeit on a different scale and to a different measure. And turning to you, Jan Bielicek, we recently witnessed a stunning display of repression in the detainment of a PhD student at the Faculty of Arts of Charles University, in your own alma mater, who was raided and arrested on, quote, anti-terrorism charges as a result of carrying a sign depicting the Palestinian militant Leila Khaled. As a co-founder and editor-in-chief of one of the few successful, widely read, progressive editorials in Czech Republic, how have these recent events been received by your community? How are you thinking with this? How are you talking about it? How are you writing about it? What kind of danger do such tactics, which serve not only to silence an individual protester, but also set a precedent for controlling dissent, what do they represent to you?
I'm not sure, but I think we were the first media outlet that published this story in a Czech media sphere. So it's one of the many encounters and things that is happening in the last two years. There's especially oppression, especially related to Palestine and Gaza in Czech Republic for many different historical and contemporary reasons. We can talk about that later on. But what's good news that let's say justice system and the courts are in, I don't know if it was in this specific case, but in general, I think the justice system is still somehow reliable. So if somebody is accused of being I don't know, terrorist, or that some claims should be criminalized and so on, chants on manifestations or demonstrations, the courts ruled it out and were somehow reliable in this sense. But mostly, like if we look into the global context, it seems like it's going to be harsher and harsher, especially when we are thinking about what's happening in the United States. The recent claims by Donald Trump that the Antifa is a terrorist organization, the more let's say looming repression of a political opposition in many different senses. That's something that will be used more and more often, especially in Czech Republic as well. But when we are talking about Britain, United States, France, almost all around Europe, it's happening more and more often, and we need to be ready. We need to. Obviously, like us as a journalist, we have to publish as many articles about this as possible, but also there has to be a movement, or there has to be a very large-scale supportive group or something like that, that the people like this are not feeling that they are alone in this, that there is some kind of infrastructure of support and care for these people. We need to build this to effectively oppose these type of measures, because it's a new reality and we have to deal with it in every possible sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to just quickly give a note out to all of you. David, are we going to go over time a little bit? Is that the plan? Okay. All right. So just have in mind for the rest of this panel discussion, if you would like to ask a question to one or all or a combination of the panelists, feel free to formulate that, and there will be a time at the end to open it to you if you would like to interject. But for now, I'm going to be a little bit of a provocateur, and Bielicek, since you just segued us nicely into this topic, and Niemec, while we have you here, I want to just bring up a recent article that you published first, where you described a, quote, reversal of the axis of influence, so to speak, as the East, quote unquote, has come to exert a perceived more geopolitical influence on Europe following the perceived decline of the age of, quote, Western expansion as it was at the end of the 1990s. Yet one might argue that this line of thinking, which draws from the work of Timothy Snyder, risks capitulating to a bipolar framework that perceives the US as not only the lesser of two evils, but also a more suitable or natural master for a dependent Europe. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that provocation in a second. Contrarily, following the demonstrations for Charlie Kirk, held by Czech political figures such as Turek and Vavra, Bělíček has written also recently against the Americanization of European political and intellectual life, advocating the reclamation of a European identity and system of values which are in fact antithetical to those of the US. In short, that Europe should, quote, free itself from the dependence on the United States. So would each of you please expand on your positions which, despite their differences, would both advocate for sweeping mobilization in support of Ukraine? And what is Europe's increasingly strained relationship with the US? What does this mean for European autonomy? So I'll let whoever wants to go first jump in.
Yes, this is a provocative question. I acknowledge that, that speaking in simple terms about the East and the West has become problematic today, especially in the light of the situation in the United States. But a key element of this crisis, current crisis of democracy, is the crisis of democracy in the United States, and that makes the crisis very serious. Nevertheless, we must recognize that the fate of the democratic world over last decades has depended on the alliance, on the Euro-Atlantic alliance, and I think this is very important for us, this alliance also today. And the crisis of democracy in the United States is not isolated phenomenon, so it echoes the crisis of democracy in Europe as well. So this authoritarian populism, whose rise we can see in the United States, is also present in Europe. So I think this is our common problem. So we had to resolve it with the United States, and yes, it was told here about the situation in Europe, and but I think the most dangerous threat is Russia for us today. And to be honest, we as European countries, we are not able to, we are not prepared for attack from Russia for this moment. So we need the alliance with the United States, and we are not prepared for new forms of conflict, which is happening now in 100 kilometers from our country, and so I need it anti-American. What does it mean in this context? So I think, and there is not Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk are not the only face of America. There exist still Democrats in the United States. So, and I think Democrats are our allies in this situation. So I am afraid that we could make the same mistake as Donald Trump and MAGA in the United States, and this mistake is isolationism, and we shouldn't isolate from the United States. So I think it's a reverse mistake, or the same mistake made from our side, and this would be would have fatal consequences for us in this situation. So in this situation, when we are threatened really from Russia, and we need the USA in this situation. So I think it's I don't like Donald Trump and his administration, and I think this is his administration can destroy the democracy in the United States, but it would be very bad for us. So we should support the democratic movements in the United States, and we have also to negotiate with the Trump administration, because we need them. We need them in this dangerous situation when the war is very close to our country, and the conflict. I think that Russia is able and is prepared to attack a country, an European country in next month or next year. So this is why we need the United States in this situation.
We need more beer for this question.
Yeah, it could be a good question to maybe wrap up this section of the panel. So I'm just going to give Jan a chance to respond, and then if maybe both of you want to have some final remarks on this as well, and then we will open it for questions.
Okay, first of all, when I was writing this article, it was the primary impulse was the death of Charlie Kirk. How many, let's say, influential people in Czech context and Czech public debate were praising Charlie Kirk's work, what he had done with turning USA in the last decade or so. There were like the leaders of the Catholic Church having a mass for Charlie Kirk and so on, and I was literally like shocked how influential the let's say MAGA and all alt-right narratives are in Czech context. It's something really specific. I would say it's accelerated by social media, obviously by podcasters and YouTube and so on, all now in hands of very, very, let's say, influential but also dangerous people. My article was about that. The alliance between Europe and the United States was formed in 1945, and I would say that in this alliance, which was beneficial for Europe for a long time, there's also kind of fragility of Europe's situation right now. We are too reliable. We are too dependent on the United States. We need to build our own capacities, even in the military sense. And I'm not sure if Donald Trump was a really good partner last year. You know, even if we are talking about Ukraine, in many senses, it paralyzed the European response to Russian invasion to Ukraine. So yeah, I know right now the European forces and army are not capable to do something significant. It's a question about scale. It's a question of unity. European Union is really, let's say, formation of nations with different interests and different political figures that governs these states. So it's really complicated, but I would argue still for a more independent European position in a geopolitical sense. We need to do it now. Yeah, of course, in 4 years there could be a different government that is maybe more open to cooperation with European Union, but we can't wait for American elections to wait what's going to happen. We have to be prepared on our own, and that's I think the Czech debate especially is flooded with American narratives since 1989, and I think it's time to think about it more deeply and more often.
All right, thank you both for your responses. Like I said, we're going to wrap up this section of the panel, but before we do, I want to give you, both of you, a chance once more to kind of close us out before we open up the audience questions. So to both of you, 1 second please. With regard to both of your own professional relationships, let's say both to philosophy, to arts, to academia, what does the question of political commitment look like for the humanities today? And the humanities broadly perceived. I mean, I know that you both cross over in different ways, but we can think about it as this. And how is the status of the, let's say, theoretician or the philosopher changing as, on the one hand, academicians are increasingly targeted or suppressed, as we're talking about here, especially in the US, but also in Europe, and institutions such as universities, but also art centers, are increasingly neoliberalized?
Yeah, we always need a basement where we can collect people, collect senses, collect ideas, and it's pretty nice that right now, during wartime in Ukraine, we got new kind of institutions. It's a really miracle for me that people got power to do it, the government help us to do it sometimes, mostly local governments. And I understand that this is new idea of DIY, when you collaborate with your local government and you create this kind of census together with local government. It's pretty strange that I can be now like promoter of my city. Now I'm in a march of Unbroken. This is ecosystem of humanity in my city. It's great rehabilitation center with a huge amount of veterans there, also civilian people who got injured because of the war, who got rehabilitation in Lviv. And it's not only about hospital, it's a mental hospital, and it's ecosystem for people also who were in captivity, who were tortured by Russia, and they got possibility in Lviv to recover not only their body, but also their souls. And it can be true and it can be alive only because of collaboration of city and different little initiatives who want to help, who want to create this kind of humanity service, probably like this. And yes, if to tell about this political stuff, I can recommend not to think about super global things, because we will get crazy if we will think about it too much. Also because we got no such huge money as Russia, for example, give now to Europe for all this media system, and all this fighting on a super great level can get us crazy, because you will give all yourselves to thinking about this fight. Only in the local level you can change something, and you can making little or big collaboration, dream about big things, and then you will stay alive. Maybe this is the reason why we do all things we do right now. Also, it is about connection of art and humanity, and this is for me now one of the most great focus on all these things.
Thank you. And Philip, if you have something to say, just briefly, please.
Okay, very briefly. I'm in agreement with the focus on local communities. So, but yeah, but the only thing I was thinking, and that's the only thing I want to say, is that the question of institutions is very intimately related to the question of sovereignty. You see, even if it's local sovereignty of some communities, or if it's a national sovereignty, okay? And I was thinking about the relation that this has to the question of American influence or not. So I agree to a certain extent that Russia is the belligerent partner. However, I'm more skeptical also about the alignment of institutions, for example, with the US. Only because I guess the question of Europe has to be put on the table again. Not of colonial Europe, that is the difficult part, and that's why Europeans don't want to do it also in academia, because talking about Europe means to talk about, well, empires and about the Second World War and so on. It has this kind of You see this after image when you speak about European sovereignty. You always have this, okay, but what does European sovereignty mean? It's the sovereignty of the ancient empires, and that's the difficult part. You have to overcome this discussion about the relation, for example, between the Enlightenment and colonization, or between the Enlightenment and patriarchy. You see, these questions are there, but they need to be addressed. And at the moment, what is happening at universities and institutions is, oh no, we won't talk about them, we won't speak about them. And I remember when Yukhui published his little book about Europe recently, there was a huge backlash regarding that. So, and it seems that there is really a resistance from Europeans to talk about Europe, and that's why they speak about Eastern Europe, Western Europe, because it's not the same thing. And okay, so it's the funny part, or not the funny is not the right word, but I hope I'm not passing a bad judgment about this. But the irony in that is that Eastern and Western Europe is Soviet heritage. It's a way of thinking that it's not from Europe, it comes from NATO in regards to Russia or to the Soviet Union, and from the Soviet Union recursively towards us. So this is Soviet and militaristic heritage that should be long in the past when we speak about it. And to just end, I'm sorry, I want just to say that, and the thing is, the values currently of the United States, institutionally and socially, are not the ones that I wish to see in Europe. The community that I wish that will be built in post-war Ukraine, I hope it will not be the American community, or at least the American project that is based on rare earths and on a war with China. And that's the reason there is all this, well, we won't let Ukraine down until now, because we need them to get our rare earth, you see. And and also in the past you can say, okay, but that is now with the Trump administration, but it is not. Regarding Palestine, it never was, and the Democrats are on the same side in that regard, regarding Israel. And before Russia attacked Ukraine, the Democrats were also very much also on the side of, well, let's not tickle Russia with helping Ukraine in any means. And also as an extension of this kind of what you could call a neo-colonization process is our dependency. Our dependency doesn't come from, is not a priori to our dependency to the United States. Our dependency is a direct consequence to delegating through American influence, because they told us so, that we had to export, like we are exporting our cognitive abilities to AI, for example, which are, by the way, also American companies, but because they told us, no, you should export your security, you should export the security to us, because we have the weapons, and that's the problem. And I finish with that sentence. The only way Europe is not able to defend itself, even though I think that the Russian attack is unlikely in the next years, because, well, they are having a pretty hard time in Ukraine, and there is no logistic capacity to do that. You won't attack them with a missile, and then you wait for the European armies to come. So there is a whole logistics that has to be negotiated from the Russian side too, to do such an attack. You just don't march into Finland and so on. But the thing is, the only reason because Europe is so incapable now, and because we feel so incapable, is because, for example, we do not have a defense system, air defense system. And we do not have this air defense system because we buy it in the United States, and we buy it there because that's the agreement that we made when we entered into NATO. So I guess there must be a discussion about European sovereignty as a liberating sovereignty, as a local sovereignty, as a technological sovereignty, as an educational and institutional sovereignty. And I guess that discussion must be held, or we can continue to sell ourselves as we did in the last century, first to the Russians, then to the Americans, or some part to the Russians and the other part to the Americans, or to both at the same time, like the Germans did. So, yeah, that's my point of view about institutional ethics.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Little stuff from me that everybody of you should think, what should you do when the war will start? And what should you do in your level, in your kind of activity? And because in Ukraine, all this round defense, it was like chaotic inside system, and it worked. It was super strange. In Switzerland, this round defense is like a system. It should work, but nobody knows if it will really work. So everybody should think what they do in their level.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to discussion. So we have a first question already from the first row, and if you would please have your question prepared. I see your hand. We'll pass the microphone to you, and please wait to ask it until you receive it. All right, please.
Okay, quick. Is it on?
You might have to switch it on.
Hello. Is it on? On. Yes. Quick question, because it's come up, and I would like to hear it amplified a little bit. And when we first went to Ukraine, one of the very first questions that was posed to us was how we perceived Europe's commitment to supporting Ukraine, and whether this would transcend the terms of particular governments and so on. And a theme that emerged from this in our ongoing discussions with people was, in light of the crisis that Europe had been going through with regards to Brexit and so on, that Ukraine was not simply providing a focal point for Europe and for a reconsolidation of Europe, but was providing Europe with a raison d'etre, that the idea of Europe was being reformulated, and that the kinds of negotiations that Philip and Jan and Václav mentioned about the future of Europe seem to be bound up precisely in what is happening right now in this war.
You can share the microphone.
These are the difficult questions. Because, you know, not only United States have elections, we also had elections 1 month ago, and the new government is created now, and so I fear, as a matter of fact, because of different reasons, but the main point is the attitude towards Ukraine and Russia, and I think this is the most important point for us. This is the question. This is the vital question for us, and the European democracy is also involved into crisis. And we see different attitudes in different countries, and typically the authoritarian populists are pro-Russian and are not ready and willing to support enough the Ukraine. And I think it is not only our moral duty, but this is also a vital strategic interest for us, because they really fight for us, the Ukrainian, and for Russia. So I study Russian politics, and I know that for Russia it is only the first step in the campaign against West, and really they are prepared. We can discuss if they are able or not to attack an European country, now NATO member country, in the next future. but they are prepared to do it, and they behave in the way that we can be sure that they prepare for this broader conflict. And from this reason, for me, the attitude towards Ukraine and Russia is very important. And I am afraid that our new government will be not willing and ready to support Ukraine enough. And it's my big fear. And so if we talk about the situation in the United States, so we have to look into the mirror, because our situation of our democracy is not so good. So, and this is my point.
I just want to add one thing, like related to the last elections. It's important, I would say, that Andrej Babiš has formed, together with Viktor Orbán and Herbert Kickl, this European fraction called Patriots for Europe. And there's no secret that there are like really strong ties between, let's say, Viktor Orbán and Donald Trump and many American conservative think tanks like Heritage Foundation and so on. So I would say, like, you were talking about this government in the context of, let's say, pro-Russia sentiment. It relates, I would say, to SPD mostly, the far-right political party. But there is also a connection to United States throughout this European fraction and Andrej Babiš's praise of Donald Trump and so on. I would say it's more complicated now in many ways. And what's interesting, like I wouldn't argue that Russia today is a fascist state. That there's no doubt about that. And what's really important for, let's say, Kremlin's ideology is a contempt or hate towards West, or maybe now more to the Europe as some kind of a concept or structure of a society. And I'm afraid that that's something that have in common with the United States as well. If you remember, like what was written in this leaked Signal chat group with Pete Hegseth and JD Vance and all that, there was a content and hate towards the European Union and Europe as the idea in general. So I wouldn't underestimate all of these forces, to be honest.
All right, thank you very much. We are running a little bit short on time. If the gentleman in the back would ask the question that you have, I think we might have time for one, possibly two more, but we're going to wrap it up here pretty short.
I'm saying the earlier comments about the Palestinian children.
Okay.
Israel builds bomb shelters for its populace, for its citizens. The military is above ground. In Gaza, Hamas builds tunnels for only Hamas. And there are no bomb shelters. So the children are above ground. What is your opinion, particularly those who claim there's genocide?
With genocide, it's difficult because it's a really juridical concept. So personally, I understand the reaction of Israel against this attack of Hamas. So it was very brutal, and the military response was understandable. But I think also if you react to the attack, so you have to respect some international law and not commit the new crimes. So, and I think that that this answer by Israel is too strong. So, and then they committed some war crimes during this response. And so it's not apology for Hamas. It's not apology for this Palestinian extremists, but they are extremists on both sides in the moment, unfortunately. So, and I have discussions with my friends from Israel and also from Palestine, and the Israelis are also very critical of their own government and their own prime minister. So, and I think, as I said, as I told you, so my support for this initiative was only the human reaction, because I think we have to have empathy for both for civilians on both sides who are suffering and terribly suffering in this moment. And it's my attitude. It's my attitude, and I have heard a lot of stories from both sides, which are terrible. So, but I think the civilians are the casualties among civilians are terrible, and we should help to the people on both sides. It's my I believe. Very firmly, yes, and the children. So the children are very helpless, and I think our government is very uncritical regarding the Israel and the government, Israel's government, and I think this would be only the small jest that we are human beings who have empathy for people on both sides. So it's very simple for me. So, this conflict is very tragic. So it's very tragic, and I regret people on both sides. So it's the only thing which I can say to this.
So regarding that, I think we were speaking about crisis. You were speaking about the notion of crisis, and to answer also Louis' question. At the moment, what we have is a crisis in the nihilistic sense, a lack of values and fundamentals. That's what nihilism at its most basic configuration means. And it is also, so to a certain extent, the Ukrainian war did in fact give some vividness to a certain notion of the European project, which is a welcomed notion if it is done the right way. So if it is done not as a mirror, for example, of American politics or the United States politics, or not as a degradation of the social state or other kind of labor fights and so on. And the European project is an ethical project, first and foremost. So it's an ethical project, it's a position, the European project as a decolonizing project, as an enlightenment project, as a gender equality project, as a diversity project. So it is an ethical. It's ethical in the truest sense of the word. It is creating a place, an ethos where different localities and singularities can coexist. Okay, that's. I'm not saying it's the only one. So I'm not saying this is exclusive to Europe. In fact, the United States, in some cities, for example, New York and so, they have some interesting politics, which I'm not going into. But it is also my belief that if you want to
stick to that project, we also have to take a position in regards to Israel. So they are both tied. So Ukraine and what is happening in Gaza are very strongly connected. And perhaps we in Europe might not feel so, but the rest of the world does. And it was a huge disservice, for example, to the fight in Ukraine, that Europe, from one moment of the other, there was an appearance that from one day to the other, we did not care about law, about international law, about rules of war, for example, which are the bedrock of international law. So yes, I would say, and I would agree, that if you want to position yourself geopolitically in a way that you also, for example, help Ukraine against Russia, you have also to stand against the Israeli vision of what geopolitics is, which is strikingly similar nowadays in its government than to what Russia
But
is
here is
doing.
one great stuff that Russian drones already several times cross the border of Europe. Maybe that's why you should think about things which are really near you and not to be blind for them.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and I will just really briefly, if you will allow me, respond to the question directly. For those of us in the West, it's a bit like the pot calling the kettle black if we morally condemn Palestinians for not building better bomb shelters to protect themselves against Western bombs. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the discussion today with a Free Palestine and Support Ukraine. So let's hear a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.